We have this poet in Iran. His name is Omar Khayyam. Around, I think, the 13th century, if I'm not mistaken. This poem is پاک از عدم آمدیم و ناپاک شدیم آسوده برآمدیم و غمناک شدیم. That we were born very clean, very pure, very pristine. But as we lived our life, we became more impure, more unclean. We were born with being calm in the Garden of Eden. But little by little, we found ourselves in the cradle of sorrow, sadness, anxiety, confusion. And I suppose you could, in your case, if I may, you could put it this way. Here you are, a relatively nice young man. Life is complicated for you. Life gets difficult, confusing, whether for pleasure, enjoyment, or coping mechanism. You journey towards drugs for perhaps a moment of calmness, a moment of release from the pains of life. And then you realize, well, I can't change my dad, I can't change my mom, I can't change society at large, it's too much. I can't change poverty, I can't change homelessness, I can't change anger, but when I do drugs, everything just disappears, okay? And it does disappear. And you have a great time. And before you know it, at first, you journey towards the world of drugs to find a release from the pains and the troubles of the world, okay? As time goes on, you realize, that not only do you have the world on your shoulder, but you also have the addiction on your shoulder, okay? And like Gilgamesh, you forget the innocence, you forget the purity, you forget the love for your parents, for your community. The world of drugs just kind of swallows you. Yeah, and then something happens. You have a metaphoric enkidu that enters into your life. You can call it moments of awareness. You can talk about, you hear the news that your mom passed or your grandfather passed or something. Something clicks and you are reminded that this is how you started life, completely free. And then all of a sudden you say, how the hell did I get myself into this situation where I can't find any release, any rescue? You know, I keep getting more and more into this world of drugs and I can't get myself out. And then somehow the God's up there looking down saying, why have you given me a stand whose heart knows no rest? He's always running around looking for another fix. What he really wants is the kingdom of God within. That's where his rest is. But he can't do it on his own. We need to do something for him. And so you either have a friend come your way, maybe you read a book, maybe you go to church, and maybe the pastor who's giving a sermon has this riveting, inspiring, teaching for that day. And you happen to be in the right time, right place, right day, and the pastor's words just go inside you. And all of a sudden you say, I want to go back to the person that I was, a Stan who was clean, who was sober, who knew a few basic things about life, like love and trust and companionship and those things. But you realize that it's far too difficult for you to journey to rehab on your own. So you begin to seek out friends. But as you seek out friends, there are the temptations on the side. Do you see? And eventually, the people who like you and love you and care for you, their numbers grow and they protect you. They put you in this castle, do you see? That all these temptations, they try to hit you, but they can't. You're way too deep into the castle. You got great protection. And little by little, you begin to go through rehab, detox, and then you begin to remember how it feels to be free, and that's the enkidu. You don't have to think of enkidu as like a real human being who walks into your life. It could be anything. It could be a human being, but it could also be a movie, a song that could be the genesis, the birth of something about you that becomes awake, that understands. The problem with understanding is that it's short-lived. It's like, when you buy milk, it has a 2-week shelf life. You need something from the outside who will constantly, that will constantly remind you. And the more you are reminded, the more guilty and ashamed you feel for everything that you have done. Also about the fact that inasmuch as you desire to change your life by yourself, you can't do anything. So humility comes about, your understanding of what it means to be helpless comes about, codependency comes about, you depend on other people so that you could change. And you don't see it as a sign of weakness. They become, so to speak, your parents in change. If your biological parents give you food, shelter, and clothing, okay, the AA center, for example, are a different kind of parents. They shelter your emotions. They make sure you don't walk towards temptation anymore. They shelter towards friends that could be negative for your life. So almost all of us in this class, there was a movie long time ago, I think it was in the 80s, the movie is called Shine. It's about a pianist. He was really, really, really good. See if you can find the movie on YouTube and watch. It's about 2 hours. Shine. Yeah, S-H-I-N-E, I think. And so the guy is really good, but because he put a lot of stress on his body, he kind of goes a little crazy. He ends up in an institute, then someone takes care of him. He goes as far as like walking around naked, jumping on a trampoline naked. And then one day, as he's walking in the rain at night, he sees this restaurant, and in it there is a piano just sitting. And all of a sudden, it's like an enkidu. He says, let me go in there. And people knew him, people in the restaurant. He goes in, and people want to stop him from going or playing the piano, but the owner says, let's see what he's doing. He's a nice guy, he's harmless. He goes in, and no one is expecting this, but all of a sudden he begins to play the piano, like Mozart. It's beautiful. And he goes there every night. And eventually he runs into a therapist, psychiatrist, who falls in love with him, and he falls in love with her, and she takes care of him. And eventually he becomes relatively healed, and he goes on the stage and begins to perform. So enkidu comes to all of our lives at different times, in different shapes and forms. We just don't know when it's going to happen. I mean, all of us long to kind of beautify our life, to make some changes to our life, whether it's a bad boyfriend or a girlfriend, maybe it's just a life that has a good amount of confusion, maybe you're depressed. And since by nature we want our lives to kind of be a replica or duplication of perfection, we're always looking and yearning and longing to find something that'll inspire us. Whether or not it works, we don't really know. There have been, the thing also you need to understand about enkidu is the following. Imagine that you have injured your back and you go to the doctor. You're still relatively young and healthy, but you've injured your back, and your doctor says you need to give your body some rest. And instead of, there was a play by Sophocles. It's an ancient poet, playwright. In one of his plays, he brings about this mythical figure, the Sphinx. And the Sphinx has a riddle or a question that I will give you, say, $10 if you tell me what sort of an animal walks on fours during daytime, walks on 3 in the afternoon, walks on 2 in the afternoon and walks on 3 in the evening. And King Oedipus, of course, says, well, it's a human being. Now imagine you're 20, okay? And it's morning time for you, you're healthy, you're running, having a great time, but you fall. All of a sudden evening comes to you. Evening in the sense that even though you're 20, you can't walk, you need help. Now you carry a cane. The cane becomes your enkidu. It helps you walk, okay? Now there comes a point, because you're young and the doctor says, You need to get rid of this cane at some point so you can kind of bring energy and strength back to your back. All right? You need to walk without the cane. There comes a point where you have to get rid of the pain and endure the pain and the struggle and the suffering to walk basically on 2 feet. So what you have is Gilgamesh needing a cane. You need a Bible. Okay? You need a Bible to walk on, to live, to act. Okay? There needs to come a point in your life where this cane, this crutch, is pushed aside, where you can simply walk on your own. Now, for Gilgamesh to walk on his own, Enkidu needs to die, as the Bible needs to die, as the Quran needs to die, as your dependency on your parents need to die. You need to remember, when you read Genesis, what happens? God looks at Abraham and says, walk away from your parents. It's time for you to grow up. Make your own life, marry, have your own children. And to paraphrase, then you will understand what your parents have gone through. Then you will understand what it means to be an adult. Then you will understand what it means to be a father. In other words, there needs to come a point to all of our lives, okay, where whatever you're dependent on to walk, now you get rid of it, and now you walk on your own. And it's a struggle, because for the first time, the only person you depend on is you.
And the kingdom of God lives within you. Look about the side that you got scriptures in you that you can pull up to help you along the way.
It's very, very true. There are a couple of things. I mean, it's a great point. And some people don't really have to get rid of the scriptures. You don't have to get rid of the Bible. There are some people, I mean, one of the things you need to understand, Stan, is, some people need the crutch, and there is nothing wrong with that, okay? Some people say, I wonder how I would feel without the crutch. Look, if you go back to the life of Jesus, for example, there had been people for about 1,500 years or so who were basically fine with going to the synagogue. They were basically fine with reading the Talmud. They were basically fine with sitting and just talking about religious stuff, but not this 12-year-old kid. It's kind of like Moses. If there is a God, I want to see it. I want to taste it. I want to touch it. Some people have this temperament. And the thing about temperament is this. The moment you are born, you are either a conformist, you play by the rules, and it's not even up to you. It's like a laptop. It's either made to be an Apple or it's made to be a PC. Is that what you call it? Right? Human beings are very much the same way. Moses is an extrovert. That's how he is. Jesus is an introvert. Okay? Now, if you happen to be an introvert, in other words, you have these yearnings from the inside. You don't know why they're there. You have great parents, but sometimes you just kind of walk around the lake aimlessly. And your mom calls you and says, son, why don't you come home? Say, yeah, mom, you're a great mom. And you don't say this to her. You just whisper it to yourself. I feel as if I just don't have a home. I don't even know why. Okay? Now, this doesn't happen to everyone. And remember, I'm talking about people who have no issues. It's not like you have just had an argument with your mother where you're walking and you realize that she wants to kick you out. I'm not talking about that. Everything about your life is just right. There is nothing wrong with your life. You just have this yearning that I'm not really quite sure what the hell is wrong with me. You have mood swings. You have fits of anger. In like an hour, you go through 5 different sets of moods. So such people can only be held in bondage, whether by scripture, by their instructors. It doesn't really matter what it is, okay? They can only be held tightly for so long before they cut loose. There comes a point where they say, the Bible is good, the Quran is good, but I have this yearning that for some strange reason, when I read the Bible, it's not enough. I want to go on my own spiritual quest. And when someone reads the Bible to you, you say, listen, I've done all of that. It doesn't work for me. Just keep your mouth shut. This is my quest. This is my confusion. This is my darkness. If you go back, hello, Zion. Oh my God, here you go. Good job. If you go to, again, to the book of Job, you'll find something very, very interesting. When Job finds himself in the thick of it, that his life is really just turned upside down, what does he have? He has 4 gospels. He has Alphaz, Bildad, Zophar, and Elihu. Consider those people to be like different parts of the Old Testament or the New Testament. A therapist, a father, or a mother who says, think this way, don't behave that way. What does Job say? Job keeps telling them, you don't know the depth of my pain. Job has no respect for any of them. You know, and he also says, listen, when a human being says what is right and what is wrong, when a human being has a belief system as to what God is or isn't, what the human being is in fact doing is saying, I am God. I know what is right. I know what is wrong. I know what's moral. I know what's immoral. And Job says, that's not what people should do. If anyone needs to talk to me, it needs to be God himself. And you get to a place where you say, I don't want the Bible to talk to me. I don't want this figure in the Bible named Jesus Christ or Moses, okay, or Jeremiah to talk to me. If there is a God, I want God to directly come down and talk to me. Now, whether you want to call that the voice of God, your own intuition, the kingdom of God, you know, those names and titles are irrelevant. Something about you opens up, you feel something, experience something. Now, that becomes your transformation. That's what Chris calls the gold stage. After a long journey, excruciating process, but there is a good chance that you will forget. Now, the thing you need to understand about power, any kind of power, whether it's physical power, spiritual power, it matters very little. See, you and I are what we call novices. Okay? It's like, if you've ever seen kids, you give them a bucket of ice cream, they want to sit there and eat the whole thing. Do they think about diarrhea? No. Do they think about headaches? No. Do they think about tummy ache? No. Do they think about a night without sleep? No. They don't think about any of that stuff. All they see is ice cream and pleasure. Okay? That's the temptation. Okay. So you and I are hungry, let's just say, in your case, let's just say, you're hungry for God. Okay? Now, being hungry means you're poor. Okay? So in poverty, you beg. We call it prayer. Whether you raise your hand this way and say, give me $10, whether it's in the street or in the church, you're praying for something you don't have. Now, imagine someone was to give you what you are asking. You have no idea what it means when poverty goes away and richness comes your way. The moment you become rich, there is a great chance you will forget the state of poverty, humility, what it means to beg. What you now have is power. Power is like ice cream. Whether you're 40, 50, 955, it matters very little. You didn't have, now you have. It's like a kid with ice cream. Now what's going to happen is you're going to get drunk with power. When you get drunk with power, your pride is going to explode. You're going to rule over other people. And you're not going to rule like Jesus Christ. You're going to be a bully. Okay? It's going to take a long, long time for this pride to become so refined until it sits. If this is the lion, you need to find a lamb. Every time the lion wants to lash out, the lamb comes forth. When you are a lamb, you become a lion only if you want to teach someone. If the person in front of you is not a student, you will continue being a lamb. Which means what? You become passive. You become forgiving. You become compassionate. Okay? If on the other hand, you have a student, what happens? your pride comes out. Okay? If this is compassion, this is mercy. If compassion is feminine, mercy is masculine. Okay? So you begin to teach, and then you become very, very aggressive. It's like if I was to come to you and say, Stan, I suffer from some substance abuse, and my wife is going to leave me and my kids are going to leave me. What do I need to do? Now, you're going to try me out a couple of times only to realize I give you a lot of pushback. Then you walk away. Then I run after you crying, saying, Stan, I really need help. What are you going to do? You're going to say, come to my house. You're going to put me in your room somewhere. You're going to lock the door and you're going to let me scream. And you're going to sit back and watch. And once in a while, you're going to open the door, give me some food. And then you're going to invite my wife and say, this is what I'm going to do. Have no worries. He'll be fixed. Because, and this pride doesn't come from you being drunk with power. You know exactly what you're doing. I don't know if you like tennis. When I was younger, I wanted to be a tennis pro. Roger Federer, who'd been playing for about, I don't know, since he was on the tour when he was 15 or so. He's now 40-some. He just retired a couple of days ago. You know, you have thousands of people standing up and applauding him and crying because he's retired. Why? You have, in the past maybe 10, 15 years, you have this tennis player who is great being in the back of the court, great being in the front of the court. He's just perfect. It doesn't matter where exactly on the court he is. He plays most beautifully. He's perhaps the best tennis player who's ever been around. Okay? Now, what that means is you have a man who plays tennis perfectly. And when people applaud him, what they're saying is, we have witnessed beauty and perfection for the past 30 years, and we want to just say thank you. And he says, thank you back. Now, there's a good amount of pride in Roger Federer, but there is a reason why he says it's okay for 30,000 people to stand up and applaud me. This is a man who's played tennis every single day for about 12 hours a day. You know, I mean, look at us. We have the privilege of living in a life as if it's a buffet. Today you can do this, tomorrow you can do that, you can do all sorts of things. Not Roger Federer. He says, I don't care about anything else under the sun except tennis, my wife, and my 4 kids. That's it. And number 1 is tennis. Number 2, wife. Number 3 are kids. Now that's the sacrifice you make to attain perfection. That's what you do to me. Because you know what it takes for me to go to detox, you lock me up and you're hard on me. That's the only way I can attain perfection. So when you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, remember, bring the story and all the different components of the story down into your own life. You know? Imagine for a moment Zion here. I'm just creating a story. This doesn't need to be true. Imagine Zion here that every night she goes home, she just says, you know, my friends have a companion, all of them. I am the only one who is single. And I want someone, you know. And, you know, the gods up there, if there are any, listen to this crying of, you know, this broken heart, and all of a sudden she walks to work in the morning and she sees a dog, and her boss says, did you know that we have a dog here? If you want to take it, you can, you know, you're a great owner for this dog. She'll be a great companion to you. That becomes an enkidu. And through this dog, she'll experience companionship, love, care, discipline, sacrifice. And then something strange is going to happen. Not anytime soon, I hope not. One day, you know, Zion will wake up from her bed. She's expecting this dog to jump under the bed, but she won't. The dog is dead. And now, through the love she had for this dog, she now tastes grief, loss. And you realize that you have a young woman who keeps getting seasoned more and more and more and more. And if she understands loneliness, praying, getting a companion, loving a companion, losing a companion, if she does this the right way, now she'll have a universal understanding of what it means to be lonely, what it means to beg for something you don't have, what it means to fall in love, what it means to care, and then what it means to lose. So, any other questions before we tackle Chris's, Chris?
Another question.
Of course, Stan, of course. Yeah. Go ahead. No, Chris, go ahead.
Okay. Imagine that someone was a philosophy teacher and they weren't just like run of the mill, but they were maybe okay, you know? And imagine like they get some bad news from the doctor, you know, about something. And it's okay for a little while. They have like some profound ideas or something about it. Then like, let's say they wake up in the middle of the night. In the middle of the night, their thinking is a lot more clear than it is during the day somehow. And they're scared to die. And they realize that even if they have some good ideas or profound ideas, they have to kind of get themselves ready to die. And then in a way where it doesn't have a conflict inside. And when you to imagine that they get themselves ready to die, the world has to go away a little bit. They have to fix something right about just them. And even teaching has to go away a little bit because when you're a teacher, you kind of know a lot of things. The fact is you got to fix yourself, get yourself right. So my question is if you get yourself right with death, teaching goes away when you get yourself right with death. What's the point of teaching in a sense?
Can you maybe ask your question? I don't even need to say that. Ask your question differently because the moment you begin to say your question, it'll just come out differently. If you were to simplify, if you can, just repeat your question.
Get yourself right with death when it's not just an abstraction, but it's really close. There's no time. It changes a lot of things about your life, including your teaching. You know, and for example, if you have a student that you like and you want to work with this student, it's going to take some time for that student to move from where they're at to where you'd like them to be. What if you don't have that time anymore, you know, as a teacher? And I guess there's a certain perspective for teaching. You can imagine yourself to be a teacher, acting in the world, changing the world, helping other people seems meaningless because you have to get right.
You know, it matters very little what your profession is and what you do in life. I think the moment you hear the news or you have this feeling that you're going to die, gradually, little by little, almost everything under the sun begins to become irrelevant. It loses its value. I remember, and I know many of you in this class, at least, if not many, at least some of you in this class have had these experiences where when I was in Oakland, when I think my brother called and said, my mom's mom, my grandmother passed away in Iran at the age of 90. So, of course, the natural reaction is to kind of cry a little bit because we were close. And then I drive to Roseville. And my mom was about 60 or so, you know, and she had some sort of a stature in our community. She was like a rock. You know, she's the glue to the family and the communities to which she belongs. So as we're sitting, the depth and the intensity of this grief, this loss is so much that without any warning, she just kind of screams. Okay. And in this screaming, and of course she screams and then she cries, like a baby, like a child. Now, in those two actions, crying and then screaming, you forget that you're 60. You forget that there are like 50 people sitting around you. You forget that the people who are sitting around you are, some of them are 70, some of them are 80. And you need to kind of keep your composure, have some self-respect, some dignity about yourself, all that stuff. But no, you don't care about any of those things. In fact, it seems as if you're in a black hole. Nothing exists except you, your grief, and your loss. Everything else is irrelevant. You don't care how other people think about you, how other people think of you, feel about you. None of those things really matter. And I think death to some extent is very much the same way. That initially, yes. It's an interesting phenomenon, Chris. I got an email this morning about early retirement. And what is interesting is I wanted to teach from a very, very young age. And never in a million years had I imagined that there would come a time where I would kind of be interested in retirement. This email came about this morning, and I said, maybe I should call my brother and say, Iraj, if I was to retire tomorrow, how is my finances going to look? And it's one thing to sit here and talk about it, but as you have been teaching for, say, 30 years, little by little, the passion for teaching, because you have been around so many students who are only pretend students. You've also been around so many students who ask good questions, but because they don't really understand their questions, it doesn't go anywhere. You've done so much where you know what inspiration is, you know what understanding is, you know what it takes for someone to really understand something and keep that understanding protected. And you also kind of lose some passion for teaching. I mean, it's very natural, psychologically, biologically, just something happens to you. You don't have the flair, you don't have the excitement as you did when you were 20. It's kind of like watching Cristiano Ronaldo playing soccer. When he was 18 playing for Manchester United, it's very different than when he's like 40 playing for Manchester United. These are like two different people. I remember when Michael Jordan, he retired from basketball, came back to playing basketball, and he just couldn't feel the ball the way he used to. It would just slip through his fingers, do you see? And little by little, you kind of gradually begin to make yourself ready for retirement. And I think death, for the most part, is very much the same way. That for us, it may the word is a bit shocking. It's not like I'm going to go home and the doctor says Amir's going to die and then tomorrow I'm dead. I have it's what in North America they call tragic death. No, I'm sorry, not tragic death, but bad death. Bad death is the following. I am 60. I'm hoping to finish up a couple of books, see my kids get married, see my wife get remarried before I die, make sure everything's in the right place, and then die, right? Now, the doctor says, Amir, you got cancer, you got 6 months to live. It's abstract. I still come to class because it's the only way I can keep cancer out of my mind. As many of us do, we deny the fact that we are sick and journeying towards our end. And so I go home after 2 weeks, and I'm coughing a little bit more, I'm more tired. And the image of cancer, the reality of cancer is more impactful. It becomes more difficult for me to deny its presence. And little by little, I find myself becoming adjusted. Sure, I do the anger stuff. I do the fear stuff. I lash out at my wife. I come to classroom and I bully my students around because I don't really know what the hell to do. This is the only stage I've known for the past 30 years. And all of a sudden, life, God, this virus, whatever you want to call it, is taking it away from me. All right? Little by little, I adjust. Now, the thing you need to understand about, say, cancer or any disease that's going to take your life is, I am not sad now because I'm going to lose my father. I am sad now because I'm going to lose myself. I'm going to lose my body. I'm going to lose my mind. My mind in the sense that I have an intellectual life. I talk to people, I write, I think, I speak in class about the things I love. Okay? I'm going to lose all of that. Then I will no longer have mobility, physical mobility. I can't talk. I can't walk. I can't bathe myself. I can't do anything. Okay? Now, as your illness becomes more grim, you have no choice but to move into a solitary life. You find yourself being more alone. And you begin to complain less. Because you know it's not the fault of your wife. It's not the fault of your kids. Like Job, you kind of just bow on the floor, on the ground. You pour some dust on your head. And you say, okay, I know I'm nothing but a maggot. I understand that now. Do you see? And as you become more alone, and as you adjust in being alone, you're able to receive death easier. And remember, as you're just bedridden, you're not coming to class. And after a while, you'll be okay with it. You're not talking as much to your friends or to your family about things intellectual. And over time, you'll be okay with it. The point I'm trying to make, whatever your situation is, you will learn how to adjust. You will learn. My father-in-law, who had stage 4 cancer, he died. I mean, he fought cancer until the very last minute. I remember him coming to, our place, and he was sick, and I had some lumber, in the backyard. You've been to the backyard. He says, I'm going to go all the way down and carry these lumbers. I said, Emmanuel, please, just stay up here. I'll put on a good movie for you. Just watch it. You'll have food and you can relax. No, I am healthy. You deny the fact you're sick. It was only the last couple of seconds that he found peace. One day I remember they took him out around the lake on a wheelchair because he could no longer walk. So he could get some fresh air to see some people. He came back home angry as hell because he couldn't do what he used to. And he resented people who could walk freely, talk freely. Do you see? And that is what a bad death is. That it's a slow, painful journey towards your ending. And I suppose the point I'm trying to make, Chris, it's a long-winded answer to a very, very good question. And I'm sorry, forgive me for responding in such a bad way. All kinds of pain, they push you into being alone. And when you're alone, you try to explain your emotions to other people, but they can't understand it. And even if they can, it gives you little relief. So from that point on, you say nothing to anyone.